Hey friends, Adam-Wilber here with Vulpine Creations, and as always, we don't monetize these videos, so if you want to show us some support, just head over to vulpinecreations.com, sign up for our newsletter, and check out our portfolio of magic there. That's all the advertising we'll do. Let's dive into today's video. Today's video is answering a question from an older video from one of the comments below, which asked, what is a good closer? Now, that's a lofty question, and there's a bunch of different types of closers. So I'm just gonna give you some tips that I have learned or used in my career on what makes a good closer and why maybe that makes it a good closer. So whether you're doing it for strolling or stand-up, the real meat of what I consider a good closer might not be the same for everybody. So all I can do is tell you what works for me and sort of my point of view on it. To me, a closer is the exclamation point, right? Think of a movie, a really great movie that you love. The closing of that movie isn't the last couple of minutes, right? It's the last real message that you're left with. What is the overall theme of that movie? What is the lesson that we could learn from that movie? And I think with magic, it's, for me, the same thing. I want to build up to a message or a theme or a takeaway. And all of the tricks build to that climax together. So it doesn't necessarily mean the last trick is your closer. A lot of people think that the last trick or your closer needs to be your strongest trick. So if you leave the audience with this idea, or leave the audience with the strongest piece of magic that you can give them, that should be the best way to close a show. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that, as long as that last trick emphasizes the theme that you're going for in your show. And don't overthink what I mean by theme. If we're just hired to entertain and make people laugh and have a good time, maybe that's the theme, right? But just make sure that the closing is something that you want them to take away with them as they leave. Like, what are they going to be discussing on the car ride home or tomorrow at the water cooler at the office, right? What's the actual message you want them to leave with, resonate with, and is that closing bit of your show or strolling set leaving them with that? Now with strolling, it's a little bit different because you might get 3 to 4 tricks, right? You got about 5 to 7 minutes with that group, and it's pretty hard to universally lay a theme that will resonate with them after 5-7 minutes, but it's not impossible, right? You can just have that last piece of magic be your signature piece, or have a line in that last piece of magic that you want them to remember. I can give you an example from my work. When I end a strolling routine, it's with in case of emergency. So at the end of that routine, a signed card has magically disappeared, and it now ends up inside of this little box. So what I want them to remember is that we shared this impossible experience together. So my closing line, while it's not the last thing I say to them, the closing line of the routine would be, hey, remember what happens when we're in an emergency? Oh yeah, we have that, just in case. And the cool thing about this is none of this would have been possible without your help. Let me show you why. Shake it, they see the card, and I want this idea of this wouldn't work if you weren't here. You guys have to be here for this moment to have existed, right? So just by putting one little line in there that plants the seed of that, that becomes my closing for my strolling set. On stage, a lot of times my shows are forced to have a theme. If I'm working in a corporate environment, they may want me to touch on whatever the theme of that event is. So perfect. In my last piece, and actually for me, it's my second to last piece. My last piece is a clock reveal where somebody in the audience has predicted the time perfectly. But that piece is the exclamation point on the entire message I'm trying to instill in the audience. So if it's a corporate event where there's a specific theme, my second to last piece, I'm gonna script that theme into the piece so it makes sense. My very last piece, which would technically be my closer, I show a clock and I talk about the importance of time. And I want people in my shows to realize that we have the same exact amount of time in a day, and we all have this one life to live, but every single minute of this life is important. That's really what I want them to take away, that every single waking, breathing minute that they're alive can have an impact on themselves, or better yet, on somebody else. So I can use the clock to tie that message in as my closer. While it's a strong piece of magic, it's not the strongest piece of magic in my show, but because I'm tying it in with the message that universally ties to the rest of my show, there's this overall theme in my show of be very, very delicate and careful what you spend your time and energy with, because you only get it once. You can't buy more of it, and it has the impact to change people's lives. So if I can weave that through my entire presentation, and then end with the exclamation point that reiterates that point, I feel like I've done my job in giving the entire show a message or a takeaway. Something that isn't just about sitting there and going, oh cool, how did they do that? But more so about, man, I never thought about that. Maybe I should think about that moving forward in my life. So my closer doesn't always have to be the strongest piece of magic. Yes, it's important. The end of your show is really strong, really powerful, and leaves them wanting a little bit more. I think that's good common practice. But you don't have to think of your closer as the blockbuster, the thing that they all remember you by, right? The closer really is the closing of your movie. Whether that's a strolling set, you get about a 7-hour short film, what's that little piece of closing that you want them to remember you by, or the experience by? In a stand-up show, in a theater show, something where you have a little more control, think about what's the overall theme that I'm trying to instill on my audience, and how can I use my closer or my last bit of the show to really emphasize that theme. So I know I didn't give you specific closers, because I think once we run into that, then you're ending up using the closers that I use because they fit my show, but they might not fit your theme or your show. There are hundreds of really solid tricks that you can end with, that you can close with, that will get a killer impact. But more importantly than the tricks, you've got to realize and ask yourself, is this aiding in the message I'm trying to instill in my audience? Okay? So I hope that makes sense. I know I'm not giving you a direct answer like these are my top favorite closers. Maybe that'll be a different video when we're talking specifically about routines and the impact they have. But I think it's really important now to emphasize the idea that the closer does not have to be a routine. It's the ending of the experience. So what do you want that ending to look like and feel like to your audience? That's where you should be focusing. Hope that makes sense. Hope you take something away from that. It helps to inspire something. And as always, thanks so much for your time and attention. And until next time, my friends, onward.